Commander Zethrak of the Korthani Empire stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, watching the primitive blue world spin lazily below. His 4 eyes tracked the movement of small metal vessels across the planet's surface, and his mandibles clicked in what his species considered amusement. These humans, as they called themselves, were about to learn what real warfare looked like. For 3 centuries, Zethrak had led the Korthani's expansion across the galaxy. He had seen civilizations rise and fall before the might of his fleet. The pattern was always the same. Initial resistance, followed by desperate negotiations, and, finally, inevitable surrender. Some species fought harder than others, but none had ever truly surprised him. The humans would be no different. "Status report," Zethrak commanded, his voice carrying the authority of countless victories. "Sir, our advanced scouts report that the human military forces are mobilizing across their major continents," replied his tactical officer, Nexus. "Their weapons appear to be chemical-based projectiles and crude explosive devices. Nothing that our shields cannot easily deflect." Zethrak's mandibles clicked again. Chemical weapons and explosives? How delightfully primitive. The Korthani had moved beyond such crude methods millennia ago. Their plasma cannons could vaporize entire city blocks, and their energy shields could withstand the fury of a star going nova. "What of their numbers?" Zethrak asked, though he already suspected the answer would be irrelevant. "Approximately 200 million military personnel across their planet, sir. However, our intelligence suggests they lack any form of unified command structure. Each of their nation-states maintains separate military forces with different equipment and tactics. Divided and primitive," Zethrak mused. "This will be over before the next cycle." The commander had studied the reports extensively. Humans appeared to be a young species, barely having achieved interstellar travel. They had not even established colonies beyond their immediate solar system. Their technology was laughably outdated, and their society was fractured into competing factions that seemed more interested in fighting each other than presenting a united front against external threats. "Begin the demonstration," Zethrak ordered. The first phase of any Korthani conquest was always the same. A show of overwhelming force designed to break the enemy's will to fight. They would destroy a single military installation with precision and overwhelming power, then demand surrender. Most civilizations capitulated immediately upon witnessing the vast technological gap between their forces and the Korthani war machine. 3 of his destroyers broke formation and descended toward the planet's surface. Zethrak watched through the tactical display as they approached what human intelligence designated as NORAD, apparently some sort of command center built into the side of a mountain. The location seemed fitting for a demonstration. Destroying their command structure would send a clear message about the futility of resistance. The destroyer's plasma cannons charged with a brilliant blue glow visible even from orbit. Energy readings spiked across the tactical display as the weapons prepared to reduce the mountain to molten slag. This was the moment when most species realized the hopelessness of their situation. But something unexpected happened. Instead of panicked communications begging for mercy, the human response was immediate and coordinated. Missiles launched from hidden positions across the mountainside, followed by what appeared to be electromagnetic pulses that briefly disrupted the destroyer's shields. The humans had somehow predicted the exact approach vector and prepared a concentrated defense. "Sir, Destroyer Squadron 7 reports minor shield fluctuations," Nexus reported, though his tone suggested this was merely a curiosity rather than a concern. "The human weapons are more sophisticated than initial scans indicated." Zethrak watched as the destroyers adjusted their approach, easily compensating for the primitive missile barrage. The plasma cannons fired, and the mountain installation vanished in a brilliant flash of superheated energy. The demonstration was complete, and the message had been sent. "Open a channel to the human leadership," Zethrak commanded. "Let us hear their surrender." But the response that came was not what he expected. Instead of a broken leader begging for mercy, a calm human voice filled the bridge. "This is General Patricia Hayes, Supreme Allied Commander of Earth Defense Forces," the voice said in clear, measured tones. "Your attack on our installation was an act of war against a peaceful planet. You have 30 minutes to withdraw your forces beyond our solar system, or we will consider your presence an invasion and respond accordingly." The bridge fell silent. Zethrak's mandibles stopped clicking as he processed what he had just heard. In 3 centuries of conquest, no species had ever responded to the demonstration with demands and ultimatums. They either surrendered immediately or descended into chaos as their leadership collapsed. Did she just threaten us? Nexus asked, his voice betraying confusion. It would appear so, Zethrak replied slowly. Open a response channel. Human Commander. Zethrak spoke directly into the communication array. I am Commander Zethrak of the Korthani Empire. We have just demonstrated our technological superiority by eliminating your mountain fortress with ease. Your primitive weapons cannot harm our vessels. Surrender now, and your species will be granted the privilege of serving the Empire. Continue this futile resistance, and we will be forced to take more drastic action. There was a pause before General Hayes responded. Commander Zethrak, you destroyed an empty mountain. NORAD was evacuated 6 hours ago, when our deep space sensors detected your fleet. You've accomplished nothing except proving that you're willing to attack without provocation. Your 30 minutes is now 28 minutes. Zethrak felt something he had not experienced in decades. Confusion. The humans had known about the attack in advance? Their primitive sensors had detected his fleet before he had even made contact? More disturbing still, they seemed genuinely unimpressed by his demonstration of power. Sir, should we proceed to Phase 2? Nexus asked quietly. Phase 2 was the systematic destruction of military targets across the planet until resistance collapsed. It usually took only a few cities before even the most stubborn species recognized the inevitability of defeat. Yes, Zethrak decided. Target their largest military installations. 5 simultaneous strikes across different continents. That should convince them of their situation. The tactical display lit up as Korthani vessels moved into position over major human population centers. New York, London, Moscow, Beijing, and New Delhi were selected as targets. Each location housed significant military assets according to their intelligence reports. Weapons charged and ready, sir, Nexus reported. Fire. 5 brilliant lances of plasma energy reached down from orbit, each one capable of turning a city block into vapor. But as the energy beams struck their targets, something impossible happened. The beams scattered and dispersed, their energy absorbed by some kind of defensive barrier that human technology should not have been capable of generating. What? Zethrak's voice cracked with disbelief. How are they deflecting plasma weapons? Sir, I'm reading massive underground power sources beneath each target location, the sensor officer reported. It appears the humans have constructed planetary defense grids that we failed to detect during initial scans. That's impossible, Zethrak snapped. Our intelligence reports showed primitive infrastructure, chemical weapons, and crude explosives. How do they possess energy shield technology? Before anyone could answer, new contacts appeared on the tactical display. Ships were rising from the planet's surface, but these were not the crude vessels they had observed during their initial survey. These ships moved with purpose and precision, their energy signatures indicating power sources far more advanced than anything in the intelligence reports. Sir, I count approximately 50 vessels rising to intercept, Nexus reported, his voice tight with concern. They're not matching any of the designs in our database. Zethrak stared at the tactical display as the human ships formed into attack formations with military precision. Each vessel was sleek and angular, clearly designed for warfare rather than the civilian space exploration craft they had expected to encounter. Run full-spectrum scans on those vessels, he ordered. The results that came back made no sense. The human ships registered energy shields comparable to Korthani technology, weapon systems that generated readings similar to their own plasma cannons, and propulsion systems that suggested faster-than-light capability. Sir, this data cannot be correct, the sensor officer said, his voice betraying the same confusion that Zethrak felt. According to our intelligence, humans only achieved interstellar flight within the last century. They should not possess this level of technology. Unless our intelligence was wrong, Zethrak said slowly, the implications beginning to dawn on him. Unless we were meant to believe they were primitive. General Hayes' voice crackled over the communication channel again. Commander Zethrak, you now have 15 minutes to withdraw. I should mention that during your demonstration, we've been analyzing your weapons and defensive systems. Your plasma technology is impressive, but It's based on principles we mastered 2 centuries ago. Your shields operate on frequencies we learned to disrupt during our wars with the Centauri Alliance. The Centauri Alliance? Zethrak's blood ran cold. The Centauri Alliance was a powerful confederation of species that the Korthani Empire had been carefully avoiding for decades. They possessed technology equal to or superior to Korthani systems, and their military was legendary for its effectiveness. You have contact with the Centauri Alliance? Contact? General Hayes sounded amused. Commander, humans were founding members of the Alliance. We've been fighting alongside Centauri, Andromedan, and vegan forces for over 200 years. Did you really think we were some isolated primitive world? The tactical situation was suddenly crystal clear to Zethrak, and it was far worse than he had imagined. The humans had not only hidden their true technological capabilities, but they were backed by the most powerful military alliance in the galaxy. Everything about this primitive world had been an elaborate deception. Sir, the human ships are moving into attack formation, Nexus reported. Should we withdraw? Zethrak's pride warred with his survival instincts. The Korthani Empire had never retreated from a single world. To withdraw now would be to admit that their intelligence had been catastrophically wrong and that they had stumbled into a conflict with an enemy far more dangerous than they had realized. But General Hayes was not finished. I should also mention, Commander, that your presence here has been reported to Alliance Command. The Centauri Third Fleet is already en route to our position. They should arrive in approximately 6 hours. If you're still here when they arrive, this will escalate from a minor border incident to a full diplomatic crisis between the Alliance and your empire. 6 hours, Zethrak repeated. The Centauri Third Fleet was commanded by Admiral Vextai, a strategist whose reputation for tactical brilliance was matched only by his ruthlessness toward enemies of the Alliance. If the Third Fleet arrived and found Korthani forces in Alliance space, it would likely trigger the very war that both governments had been working to avoid. 5 minutes remaining, Commander, General Hayes said calmly. I suggest you use them wisely. Zethrak stared at the tactical display, watching as more human ships continued to rise from the planet's surface. What he had thought would be a simple conquest had turned into a potential disaster that could destroy everything the Korthani Empire had built. For the first time in 3 centuries of military service, Commander Zethrak found himself completely outmaneuvered by an enemy he had never truly understood. The silence on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion stretched for long seconds as Commander Zethrak processed the magnitude of his miscalculation. Around him, his crew waited for orders that he was not yet prepared to give. Everything he thought he knew about warfare, about conquest, about the balance of power in this galaxy had just been turned upside down. Sir, Nexus ventured carefully. Your orders. Zethrak's mandibles twitched as he studied the tactical display. 50 human warships hung in space before his fleet, their weapons trained on his vessels with military precision. But it was not their number that concerned him. The Korthani fleet still outnumbered the humans 3-1. It was the implications of what General Hayes had revealed. Open a private channel to my flagship commanders, Zethrak ordered. Emergency Tactical Conference. Within moments, the holographic images of his 5 squadron leaders materialized on the bridge. Each had led successful campaigns across multiple star systems, and each now wore expressions of confusion that mirrored Zethrak's own uncertainty. Report status, he commanded. Captain Torvin of the Heavy Cruiser Squadron spoke first. Sir, my sensors are detecting energy signatures from the human vessels that match Alliance standard specifications. Their shield harmonics are synchronized with Centauri protocols. Confirmed, added Captain Xeris from Destroyer Squadron 1. These ships are not primitive constructs. They're military vessels built to Alliance specifications and crewed by personnel trained in Alliance tactical doctrine. Zethrak felt his confidence continuing to erode. Alliance tactical doctrine was considered among the most sophisticated in the galaxy. It emphasized adaptability, misdirection, and the use of superior intelligence to defeat larger forces. The fact that humans had mastered these techniques suggested a level of military sophistication that completely contradicted their intelligence reports. Captain Vorth, he addressed the commander of his reconnaissance ships. Explain to me how our intelligence failed so completely. Captain Vortha's image flickered slightly as data streams passed behind him. Sir, I've been reviewing our surveillance data from the past year. The humans appear to have maintained 2 entirely separate infrastructure systems. The primitive facilities we observed were real, but they were civilian installations designed for planetary commerce and basic space exploration. The military infrastructure was completely hidden from our scans. Hidden how? Underground facilities, sir. Massive construction projects that appear to have been ongoing for decades, possibly centuries. Our surface scans detected none of it because the humans used natural geological formations to mask their true capabilities. Zethrak's tactical mind began to appreciate the scope of what he was facing. The humans had not simply hidden their technology, they had created an elaborate deception that had fooled Corthani intelligence for years. This level of strategic planning suggested a military philosophy fundamentally different from anything he had encountered. Sir, incoming transmission from the human commander, the communications officer announced. Put her through. General Hayes' voice filled the bridge again. But this time Zethrak listened with new respect for the mind behind the words. Commander Zethrak, I hope you're using your remaining time productively. I wanted to provide some additional information that might help you understand your situation.
I'm listening, Zethrak replied.
The installation you destroyed earlier belonged to something we call the Museum of Primitive Defense. It contained examples of our military technology from approximately 200 years ago, maintained as a historical exhibit. The weapons that fired on your ships were museum pieces operating on automatic protocols. Museum pieces. The defensive fire that had briefly disrupted his destroyer's shields had come from weapons that humans considered obsolete historical artifacts. Zethrak felt something that might have been fear beginning to creep into his thoughts. Your current position is being monitored by our deep space detection grid, Hayes continued. This system extends approximately 50 light-years from Earth and can track objects as small as fighter craft. We've been aware of your fleet since you entered the outer system, approximately 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks. They had been observing and planning for 3 weeks while he believed he held the element of surprise. Zethrak realized that every action he had taken, every tactical decision, had likely been anticipated and prepared for. Additionally, I thought you should know that your fleet composition and capabilities have been transmitted to Alliance Command. Our analysis suggests that while your individual ships are formidable, your tactical formations follow predictable patterns based on overwhelming force rather than strategic flexibility. The words hit Zethrak like physical blows. Predictable patterns. In 3 centuries of conquest, no enemy had ever analyzed his tactics and found them wanting. Yet this human general spoke as though his strategies were transparently obvious. Sir, Nexus whispered urgently, new contacts on long-range sensors. Multiple ships approaching at high speed. Zethrak's attention snapped to the tactical display. A cluster of new signatures was approaching from the direction of the outer system, their velocity indicating advanced faster-than-light propulsion. Classification. Unknown configuration, sir, but energy signatures match Alliance specifications. I count 12 vessels, ranging from frigate to battlecruiser class. 12 ships should not have concerned Zethrak. His fleet numbered over 40 vessels. But the approaching signatures were moving with a coordination and purpose that suggested experienced military crews operating with perfect tactical intelligence. This is Admiral Sarah Chan, commanding Alliance Patrol Group 7. A new voice announced over the communications channel. Commander Zethrak, you are in violation of Alliance territorial space. Withdraw your forces immediately or face the consequences. Another human voice. Another calm statement of fact delivered without emotion or bluster. Zethrak was beginning to understand that this confidence was not arrogance. It was the certainty of personnel who knew exactly what they were capable of achieving. Admiral Chun, Zethrak replied. I was not aware this system fell under Alliance protection. All Terran space has been under Alliance protection since the Centauri Accords of 2387. Chun responded. Your intelligence appears to be significantly outdated. Significantly outdated. Zethrak realized that the Corthani Empire's information about this region of space was not merely incomplete, it was deliberately obsolete. Someone had been feeding them false data for years, possibly decades. Sir, the human admiral is requesting a private communication channel. The communications officer reported. Accept it. Admiral Chen's image appeared on the main screen, and Zethrak found himself studying the human with professional interest. She appeared young by Corthani standards, but her eyes held the kind of steady confidence that only came from extensive combat experience. Commander Zethrak, Chun began. I'm going to share something with you that might help you understand your situation. Are you familiar with the Battle of Kepler 442? The name struck Zethrak like a physical blow. The Battle of Kepler 442 was legendary throughout the galaxy. A massive engagement where Alliance forces had defeated a hegemony fleet nearly twice their size through superior tactics and coordination. It was studied in military academies across dozen species as an example of perfect strategic execution. You were there? He asked. I commanded the 3rd Squadron, Chun replied matter-of-factly. We developed several of the tactical innovations that became standard Alliance doctrine following that engagement. The humans you see before you have been fighting alongside Alliance forces for over 2 centuries. We've participated in campaigns against the Hegemony, the Sithari Empire, and the Void Hunters. Each name Chun mentioned represented military threats that the Korthani Empire had carefully avoided. These were not primitive opponents, they were some of the most dangerous civilizations in the galaxy. Your tactical profile suggests you specialize in overwhelming force against technologically inferior opponents, Chun continued. That's a viable strategy against many civilizations, but it has significant weaknesses when facing opponents who understand your methodology. What weaknesses? Zethrak found himself asking, genuinely curious despite his deteriorating tactical situation. Your formations prioritize firepower concentration over maneuverability. Your attack patterns rely on predictable approach vectors. Most importantly, your strategy assumes that superior technology automatically translates to tactical advantage. These assumptions work well against primitive opponents, but they become liabilities when facing experienced military forces. Zethrak studied the tactical display with new eyes. Chun was right. His formations were designed to maximize the impact of superior firepower, not to outmaneuver an intelligent opponent. Against primitive civilizations, this approach had been devastatingly effective. But, looking at the human ship formations, he could see how their positioning negated many of his advantages while creating opportunities for coordinated strikes against his most vulnerable vessels. Sir, Admiral Chun is receiving additional reinforcements, Nexus reported. I'm detecting at least 20 more vessels approaching from multiple vectors. Multiple vectors? Zethrak felt his tactical situation deteriorating rapidly. If the humans could coordinate attacks from multiple directions simultaneously, his formation would be caught in a crossfire that could prove devastating. Commander, General Hayes' voice rejoined the conversation. You now have approximately 90 seconds before our reinforcements arrive in weapons range. I want to be very clear about something. We don't want this fight. Earth has no quarrel with the Korthani Empire, and a military engagement here serves no one's interests. Then what do you propose? Zethrak asked. Withdraw your forces to the edge of the system, Hayes replied. We'll arrange for formal diplomatic contact between your government and Alliance Command. There may be opportunities for peaceful cooperation that would benefit both our civilizations. Cooperation. Zethrak had spent 3 centuries conquering other species, and now humans were offering partnership instead of demanding his surrender. The concept was so foreign to his experience that he struggled to process it. Sir, the approaching reinforcements are entering weapons range, the tactical officer announced. Zethrak looked at the display and saw that his fleet was now outnumbered nearly 2-to-1 by vessels that appeared to be technologically equal to his own ships. More importantly, the human formations were positioned to exploit every weakness in his tactical arrangement that Admiral Chun had identified. For the first time in his military career, Commander Zethrak found himself in a fight he could not win through superior firepower. The humans had superior intelligence, superior positioning, and apparently superior understanding of tactical warfare. Continuing this engagement would likely result in the destruction of his entire fleet. Sir, your orders? Nexus asked quietly. Zethrak stared at the tactical display for a long moment, his mind racing through possibilities and finding none that led to victory. The humans had outmaneuvered him completely, and they had done it while offering him a path to survival with dignity intact. Signal all ships, he finally commanded. Begin withdrawal to the edge of the system. Maintain defensive formations, but do not target human vessels unless fired upon. Sir, Nexus sounded confused by the order. You heard me, Zethrak said firmly. We are leaving. As his fleet began its withdrawal, Zethrak continued studying the human formations. Even in victory, they maintained perfect discipline and coordination. No individual ships broke formation to pursue or harass his withdrawing vessels. They simply watched with professional alertness as the Korthani fleet moved toward the system's edge. Commander Zethrak, Admiral Chen's voice followed them as they withdrew. When you report back to your superiors, I suggest you recommend establishing formal diplomatic channels. The Alliance is always interested in peaceful relationships with honorable military forces. Honorable military forces. Despite his defeat, Zethrak felt something that might have been pride at the humans' assessment. But more than that, he felt a growing curiosity about these humans and their methods of warfare. In 3 centuries, no enemy had ever defeated him so completely while simultaneously offering him respect and opportunity for future cooperation. As the Eternal Dominion reached the edge of the system and prepared to jump to faster-than-light travel, Zethrak found himself looking forward to the diplomatic meetings that would follow. For the first time in his career, he had encountered an enemy that might teach him something new about the art of war. 6 standard galactic cycles later, Commander Zethrak stood in the diplomatic chamber aboard the neutral station Harmony Point, watching as human representatives prepared for the formal first contact proceedings between the Korthani Empire and the Terran Alliance. Everything about this situation continued to challenge his understanding of how civilizations interacted. The station itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering, built jointly by 7 different species and maintained as neutral territory for exactly these kinds of diplomatic encounters. What struck Zethrak most forcefully was that humans had apparently been instrumental in its construction, despite his intelligence reports indicating they were a newly spacefaring species. Commander Zethrak, a familiar voice called from across the chamber. He turned to see Admiral Chen approaching, but she was no longer wearing military dress. Instead, she wore the simple diplomatic robes that indicated her role as a formal ambassador. Admiral, Zethrak replied, offering the respectful gesture that Korthani protocol required when acknowledging a worthy opponent. Please call me Sarah, Chen said with what humans called a smile. We're here as diplomats now, not military commanders. The casual use of her personal name was another cultural difference Zethrak was still processing. Among the Korthani, formal titles were maintained even in private conversation. The human approach suggested either disrespect for protocol or a fundamentally different understanding of how relationships functioned. Sarah, he repeated carefully, I must confess, your people continue to surprise me. In my experience, military commanders do not typically transition into diplomatic roles. That's interesting, Chen replied, settling into one of the chairs arranged around the conference table. Among humans, we've found that our best diplomats are often those who understand the costs of warfare most intimately. Someone who has seen battle is less likely to view conflict as an easy solution to political problems. The statement was so contrary to Korthani thinking that Zethrak found himself sitting down across from her, genuinely curious about the philosophy she was describing. In the Korthani Empire, we maintain strict separation between military and diplomatic functions. Our diplomats negotiate, our commanders fight. The skills are considered incompatible. Why? Chen asked, and something in her tone suggested genuine curiosity rather than challenge. Because, Zethrak explained, drawing on centuries of imperial doctrine, military thinking focuses on achieving objectives through force and dominance. Diplomatic thinking requires compromise and accommodation. The two approaches cannot coexist. Chen was quiet for a moment, and Zethrak could see her considering his words. Can I tell you about something that happened during the Battle of Kepler 442? Please. We were facing a hegemony fleet that outnumbered us nearly 3-1. Their commander, Admiral Vexthal, was considered one of the finest military minds in their empire. By every measure of conventional military analysis, we should have been destroyed within the first hour of combat. Zethrak leaned forward slightly. The Battle of Kepler 442 was studied throughout the galaxy, but he had never heard details from someone who had actually participated. Instead of engaging in direct combat, we opened communication channels and began talking to individual hegemony ship commanders. We learned that many of them were there not from conviction, but because they had been conscripted from conquered worlds. Their families were being held as insurance for their loyalty. You turned their own forces against them? Zethrak asked. Not exactly, Chen replied. We offered them a choice. Any hegemony vessel that wished to withdraw could do so without being fired upon. We would provide safe passage to neutral territory and assistance in relocating their families away from hegemony control. And they accepted? 18 ships defected during the first hour of combat. Admiral Vexthal found himself commanding less than half his original force, and those remaining ships were crewed by personnel who were now questioning whether their cause was worth fighting for. Zethrak processed this information slowly. You achieved tactical superiority through psychological warfare rather than superior firepower. We achieved victory by understanding that the enemy fleet was composed of individuals with their own motivations and concerns, Chun corrected. Force would have gotten us killed. Diplomacy saved thousands of lives and accomplished our strategic objectives more completely than any military victory could have. But you were prepared to fight, Zethrak observed. Your ships were positioned for combat. Of course, diplomacy without the capability to defend yourself is just wishful thinking. But force without the wisdom to know when not to use it is just destruction for its own sake. Before Zethrak could respond, the chamber doors opened and additional representatives began entering. He recognized General Hayes immediately, but the other humans were unknown to him. More surprising was the diversity of species among the delegation: Centauri, Andromedans, even what appeared to be a vegan representative. Commander Zethrak, General Hayes approached with the same calm confidence he remembered from their earlier confrontation. Thank you for accepting our invitation to these discussions. General Hayes, Zethrak replied formally. I must admit, the composition of your delegation surprises me. I expected to negotiate solely with human representatives. That's because you're not just negotiating with humanity, a new voice interjected. Zethrak turned to see a Centauri admiral approaching, his scaled features arranged in what he recognized as an expression of polite interest. I am Admiral Ctherax of the Centauri Third Fleet. The Terran Alliance operates as a true coalition. Decisions affecting one member species affect us all. The implications of this statement were staggering. Zethrak had assumed he would be negotiating with a single species that happened to have alliance relationships. Instead, he was facing a genuine multi-species government where humans appeared to be equal partners rather than subordinate members. How does such a system function? He found himself asking. How do you resolve conflicts between species with different interests? Through consensus building and compromise, Admiral Ctherax replied. Each member species contributes their strengths to the collective whole. Humans excel at strategic planning and adaptation under pressure. Centauri provide industrial capacity and logistical expertise. Andromedans offer scientific innovation and exploration capabilities. And when consensus cannot be reached, then we keep talking until it can be, General Hayes said simply. The alternative is fragmentation, which serves no one's interests. As they took their seats around the conference table, Zethrak found himself studying the dynamics between the various representatives. There was no obvious hierarchy, no indication that any single species held authority over the others. Decisions appeared to be reached through discussion and mutual agreement rather than orders from a supreme commander. Commander Zethrak, Admiral Chun began formally. We've requested this meeting to address several issues arising from our recent encounter. First, we need to establish clear boundaries and protocols to prevent future misunderstandings. Second, we're interested in exploring whether there are areas where our civilizations might benefit from cooperation. Cooperation, Zethrak repeated. In what form? Trade opportunities, shared research projects, joint security arrangements for mutual threats, General Hayes explained. The galaxy is large enough for multiple strong civilizations to coexist profitably. And if the Korthani Empire is not interested in cooperation? Zethrak asked, testing their response. Then, we respect your decision and maintain appropriate defensive postures, Admiral Ctherax replied without hesitation. We don't believe in forcing relationships that aren't mutually beneficial. The casual acceptance of potential rejection was another aspect of human thinking that challenged Korthani assumptions. In his experience, negotiations were typically structured around threats and ultimatums. These representatives seemed genuinely indifferent to whether the Empire chose to engage with them. However, Chun added, we should discuss the intelligence failures that led to your initial assessment of human capabilities. Zethrak felt his mandibles tense slightly. This was the conversation he had been dreading since his return to Empire space. What about them? Someone has been providing your government with deliberately false information about our civilization, General Hayes said directly. Our analysis suggests this misinformation campaign has been ongoing for several decades. We need to identify the source. You believe we were deliberately misled? We know you were, Admiral Ctherax confirmed. The question is by whom and for what purpose? Chun activated a holographic display above the conference table, showing a detailed timeline of Korthani intelligence reports about human capabilities. Zethrak studied the data with growing alarm as he realized the scope of the deception. These reports consistently understated our technological capabilities, our military strength, and our alliance relationships, Chun explained. More importantly, they were structured to make Earth appear to be an ideal target for Korthani expansion. Isolated, primitive, and defenseless. Someone wanted us to attack you, Zethrak said slowly, the implications becoming clear. Someone wanted to provoke a conflict between the Korthani Empire and the Terran Alliance, General Hayes confirmed. The question is why. Zethrak's mind raced through the possibilities. A war between two major powers would destabilize the entire region, creating opportunities for third parties to expand their influence. It would also likely result in significant casualties on both sides, weakening potential opposition to other expansionist powers. The Scytheri Empire, he said suddenly. They've been positioning themselves to exploit any conflict between major powers. That was our assessment as well, Admiral Ctherax agreed. Scytheri intelligence services are sophisticated enough to maintain deep cover operations for decades. The revelation that his empire had been manipulated into a potentially disastrous conflict changed everything about Zethrak's understanding of the current situation. The humans had not been his true enemies. They had been fellow victims of a more sophisticated opponent's manipulation. What do you propose? He asked. Joint intelligence sharing to identify and counter Scytheri infiltration in both our governments, Chun replied. Coordinated diplomatic efforts to expose their manipulation to other galactic powers, and military cooperation to prevent them from achieving their strategic objectives. Military cooperation? The Scytheri Empire respects only strength, General Hayes explained. They need to understand that their manipulation has failed and that both our civilizations are prepared to defend themselves and their allies. Zethrak found himself considering possibilities that would have seemed impossible just days earlier. The humans were not offering conquest or submission. They were proposing partnership between equals for mutual benefit and security. I would need authorization from the Empire Council, he said carefully. Of course, Chen agreed. We're prepared to provide detailed intelligence briefings to support your recommendations. And if the Council decides against cooperation, then we maintain our defensive postures and hope that the Scytheri Empire doesn't succeed in provoking other conflicts, Admiral Ctherax replied. But, Commander, I think you understand better than most what the humans are capable of achieving when they put their minds